Hey, all you space cats. It's the most underground artist in the world, Mitch here, and you're listening to the Black Hole Podcast. This is season 5, episode 6 of Trafnet, season 5. It's been about a month, so I thought I should do another podcast. I try to keep up at least once a month, sometimes more frequently. Some updates, but we're kind of stagnated here looking for a board of an executive board for the nonprofit of Trafnet. But I have a couple updates, and so it's a traffic magnet business where we streamline traffic. We also look into the hackability of newer vehicles to see if the audio systems can be hacked, the semi-autonomous and autonomous features can be hacked. If you think that's a good idea, contact me through my websites or directly. But first, I want to start off by telling a story, and it has to do with these newer vehicles and how they're being designed so that you cannot work on them and you need a computer technician to even deal with these newer vehicles. And it doesn't have to be this way. We could have very simple vehicles that are electric that have most of the features that you have in these modern vehicles. But it's a story about an oil change. I change the oil in our vehicles most of the time. My spouse and my vehicle. We have two vehicles, and she has the newer vehicle. It's a 2014 Volkswagen Jetta, and I don't want to knock Volkswagen because they did make it very easy to change the oil in this model of car. It's very nice to change the oil. There's no obstacles. But I usually change the oil in Utica at my parents' house. It's easier. I have to do it on the street here in the city where I live. So I had been to Krabby Kelly's in Utica, Pennsylvania. Stopped by Krabby Kelly's for all your STDs, that's snacks, tobacco, and drinks. And I had had some drinks. I had had some Bloody Marys. It was a Sunday morning. We usually head back to the Pittsburgh on Sunday afternoon, evening. So I had a few in the morning, and then I let those go by the wayside and sober up throughout the day. But I had had a couple Bloody Marys, and then I came back and changed my wife's oil in her Volkswagen. And changed the oil, I did everything, and I shut the hood of the vehicle, and then, as I said, later in the day, we drove to Pittsburgh. And it's an 86-mile drive, just about. About 50 miles, going 70 miles an hour on the Interstate 79. About 50 miles into our trip back to Pittsburgh, a hazard light comes on the dashboard. I continued to drive it all the way to the house. We made it to the house. I opened the hood, and there the lid to the oil was sitting on top of the motor. So the oil system in cars is a pressurized system. So that car, to Volkswagen's credit, drove 86 miles without a pressurized oil system and did not blow up. I was lucky. The engine probably should have blown, and I don't recommend doing that, obviously. But I should have had major damage to the engine, had to replace the whole engine. I got lucky. Oil had spurted up under the hood, and it was a situation. But got more oil, got the lid on, everything worked out all right. I didn't have to drop $5,000 or $10,000 on a new engine for my spouse's car because of oil change mistake. And so I learned my lesson: do not imbibe, do not drink, and change your oil. So that's a lesson that everybody should take to heart. But what I'm getting at here in this story is that when I grew up, I had vehicles that had an oil pressure gauge in the dash. And almost every vehicle from I don't know how long ago, up until the 80s, had these oil pressure gauges. It was a little needle, just like the temperature gauge I don't know if you've seen one of those, because they took them out of the vehicles. They took the oil pressure gauge out of the vehicle. Now it's just supposedly hazard lights, but you used to be able to see your speedometer, your RPMs, and oil pressure gauge and temperature gauge. Now, with this oil pressure gauge, they had them in the vehicles because they expected people to change their own oil, or a certain amount of people to change their own oil. And you would immediately see, if you left the lid off your oil, that the oil was not up to pressure. They took these gauges out, and I really don't know why. The only thing I can think of is that they don't want you to change your own oil. They want you to blow up engines so that you have to go through a dealership and get a new engine, things like that. So that's what I mean with these auto manufacturers. They're pushing towards a system where you can no longer service your own vehicle. You need a software engineer to update your vehicle, and it's getting harder and harder to find a newer vehicle that doesn't have these options, and just is a very bare bones model of vehicle. So that's my story about oil pressure gauges, why we no longer have them. And again, it would be easy for a hazard light to come on if the oil pressure if the pressurized system did not come up to pressure. I think you could design a hazard light for that, but that did not come on. I don't think a hazard light. I think it was an oil hazard light, but it was more to do with the fact that the oil was low and not that it was not pressurized with the lid sealed on the oil. So that's my story. Let's change things. Let's come together under Trafnet and pressure these automobile manufacturers to be transparent and show and have a list of hackable vehicles and things like that. So I'm looking for a nonprofit board for the Trafnet nonprofit before I pay to form a nonprofit. I want people on board. Like, here's the thing. I've pitched a lot of ideas on this podcast. I think they're really good ideas. But nobody has even, other than my family, has bothered to say, you have really good ideas, I want to invest with you, or I want to help you. Or just, you have really good ideas, keep going with those. I'm looking for people to reach out to form this board. Maybe you're on the fence. Maybe you don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you don't think people will put magnets on the back of their vehicles. Maybe you don't want a list of vehicles that are hackable. By the way, who else are you going to trust? I'm not going to take a bribe to say that this vehicle is non-hackable. So who are you going to trust to make this list of hackable vehicles with autonomous and semi-autonomous features? You know me, I'm not going to take a payoff. I'm going to tell you the truth. That's what this podcast is about. And so maybe you're on the fence. You don't think I have good ideas. Or maybe you just don't know. You could always donate to promote this podcast, right? If we get it out to more and more people, maybe those people will say these are genius ideas and we should move on them swiftly because we have climate change and we should streamline traffic and things like that. So you can donate. You could email me through my website and say I'm about to donate $20 or whatever. Please use it to promote the podcast, the Black Hole Podcast. And then there's ways we can go through Google and other platforms. We could buy a television commercial, stuff like that. So we can figure out how to promote this podcast to get it out to a wider audience. But maybe some people like that it's an underground podcast. I don't know. I'm torn, but I just do this to put my ideas out there and hope that we can figure out how to get this ball rolling. On that note, I'm looking into. I've a lot of ideas that I haven't disclosed that I'm saving for when I have some funding, and one platform that I might move into next is pornography. There's money in porn. I'm searching through my ideas that are up in my head. I don't write them on my computer because I don't think my computer's secure. You can't buy a computer that doesn't have a Wi-Fi antenna in it. There's a whole thing. So these are all up in my brain, but it's a platform, and there's money in pornography, I know, through the internet. So it would be guilt-free pornography. So what I mean by that is that we can ensure that no human trafficking or sex slavery was used to produce this pornography, and they would be still images, and it would ensure that at least 50% of any revenue generated from those images goes towards the pornography models, the subjects of the photographs, at least. Now, it's designed so that they can get more, up to 99% of the profit from those images, but at a minimum, they get 50%. So, if you'd like to, I have a nice camera. If you're out there and you'd like to model, or you like the idea and you think this could gain traction, contact me through my websites, and I'll go into my websites in a minute. I just want to update on the clothing line. Last season and the seasons before, I talked about a clothing line, ideas for clothing line, because I work at an embroidery shop. And so I have a new direction. It was to subsidize clothing for people with disabilities, and that was the goal of the clothing line, and we're still going to heavily donate to do that. And I have some money set aside that I'm going to donate to a disability clothing provider very soon. But the clothing line, I have a different idea and a different direction for it, since that's not taking traction. The subsidizing clothing for disability is not gaining much traction. Nobody's reached out to me about that. So watch for that update on the plotm.com website. That's plot, as in a plot of a book, the letter M.com. That'll be coming on the winter solstice on December 21st. You can see that description, and I'll change that around. As for my websites, I have 4 websites: almavoter.com, that's like alma mater, but almavoter.com, trafnet.org, plotm.com, and mitch4mayor.com. That's Mitch, the number 4mayor.com. These websites have little pop-up windows that say they use cookies to do whatever. It's a warning window, and you can click accept or not accept. Now, there's a federal law or state law that requires all websites, if they have cookies, to have these little pop-up windows that warn people about them. As far as I can tell, now I'm not a hacker, I don't know a lot about computers. As far as I can tell, GoDaddy, who I have all my websites through, uses cookies to generate the data. Like when I go into my account, it says 30 people in the last 30 days visited this site. And that's about what I get on my 2 websites, on plotm.com and mitchformayor.com, is about a visitor per day. So that's what the cookies are. It just tells me how many people visited the site, as far as I know, unless GoDaddy is using cookies to track you somehow. But I don't generate cookies. It's just for data collecting purposes. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Neon Grouse. Go to neongrouse.com if you need any embroidery, screen printing done. Ask for me, and I will still use some of my commission to subsidize clothing for people with disabilities. Also, please subscribe to the Disability TV YouTube channel. There's videos of hikes, outdoor videos, and there's also the Hurry into Florida podcast set to disaster video. If you want to listen to the podcast through that way, because the Hurry into Florida podcast is going to disappear in about a month. So thanks for listening. Join me next time. and appreciate you reaching out